So we will go ahead and get started here because it is 101. So to those of us who are joining us live, thank you for taking some time out of your day to build a CRM integration with us. My name is Anurag. I work in product marketing here at Alloy. I'm joined by Kelly, who is a solutions engineer and the one who set up our demo for today. And in this demo, as we've mentioned previously, what you're going to see is the ability to build an integration between a basic React application and a CRM like Salesforce. We'll be able to sync contacts from Salesforce directly to the application and then write new contacts that are created in the application to the CRM. So without any further ado, I will pass it over to our solutions engineer, Kelly.
Great. Thanks, Anurag. Let me get my screen shared and we'll get started. Alrighty. You should be able to see my screen here now. So what we're looking at is the demo app here on the right. So this is what's available in the GitHub. So if any of you had a chance to take a peek through that, let me drag it on over here. But this is something you can try out yourself if you'd like. Just clone the repo and you can sign up for free for the Alloy Unified API, get an API key and see how this works for yourself. So first thing I'm going to do to get started here is show the kind of full flow that we're building towards. So we're going to be connecting a third-party app, Salesforce, Zoho CRM. We're focusing on CRM apps today. We're going to list out contacts. So that's pulling in data from the CRM once we make a connection. And then we will also be writing data to the CRM as well. So first things first, when I hit this connect app button, it's going to do a couple of things. So it's launching the Alloy front-end SDK. So this is something that our customers typically put in their app to get fully managed authentication. So you don't have to worry about refresh tokens, access tokens, anything like that. We'll walk into it in the code in just a minute, but it's just a few lines to make this pop up and let your users connect to any CRM. So on the back end, we do a couple things. We're generating a token using a short-lived JWT. We pass that into the SDK function to launch it up. And that's sort of how we manage our authentication against the user. So for this single user, I'm going to go ahead and connect my Salesforce. I'm going to hit continue. And I just need to grab my Salesforce subdomain here from my other screen. One sec. Alrighty. So when I hit connect to Salesforce CRM, and let me actually sign out of my Salesforce just so we can see this end to end here. All right, so we're all signed out, just so it doesn't auto log us in when we go through the OAuth flow here. So now I'm going to hit connect. It's going to bring me from the demo app, or you can imagine your app, out to Salesforce. I'll go ahead and sign in, just typical OAuth 2 flow. And it brings me right back to the app when it's done. So what that does is it's generating a connection ID here with Alloy, which we can then use to start fetching data. Now, it does take a couple minutes to start syncing contacts. So there's none quite yet, but I'll show you. I've got one I set up a little bit ago just to show the data. Either way, though, I want to show the API call that's being made here out to Alloy. So we have our connection ID that was just created. We're passing it. And right now, there's still data syncing in, but it would show up here shortly in just a few minutes. Now, what I can do, since I said I have one of these sort of already created, within my Alloy, I can grab that other connection ID, and I'm just going to manually set it to one of the old ones so we can see some of the data coming in. So back in my demo app here, I'm just going to go ahead and set that on local storage, which I'm just using for simplicity here. All right. Now, when I go refresh this page, bring this down a little bit, refresh our contacts, and we now have all the contacts that were synced in from our Salesforce. So we're pulling that data in from Salesforce. Again, it's the same call, just a different connection ID as those records sync in. So we're getting all the contact data now from the Alloy Unified API. Let's go ahead and create a new contact. So we'll do like Waldo. Can't think of too many good names here, But let's go ahead and create this contact. When I do that, it's going to fire off a write request, a post API call to the Alloy Unified Contacts API. So I hit enter there, make this so we can see that request. Uh-oh, looks like I need to re-authenticate this Salesforce account. So let me go ahead and grab that connection ID I just created. Seems like I broke it since last night. All right, and so we create our contact there. I think I might have still got an error. Just one sec. Let me swap this out for another user. That should do that for us. We have a couple of environment variables in the project here that are set, just the Alloy API key and user ID. That's sort of what we use to link together the, that's what's required to initially launch that SDK that we're working with. I'm gonna go ahead and create a fresh connection here to Salesforce. Then we'll write that data to the CRM. Cool. So we got the contact created. We can see the data that comes back from the API here. And if we go back and log into our Salesforce, head over to the contacts page, we got John Appleseed here, who we just created. So we've been able to fetch data to our custom app here, as well as writing data. So kind of the next step that we're going to do is remove all the Alloy code from the mix and rebuild this more or less from scratch. So the way that that works, to do that, I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. I'm going to switch to the start branch in this project. The start branch is basically, there's two branches. The main branch you could consider the solution. So everything should already be working in there. You just plug in those two variables, the API key and the user ID, and then it will all work if you run the server. But if you want to kind of do it yourself and follow the tutorial, switch to the start branch, and we'll see the code changed a little bit up here because we kind of removed the Alloy APIs and SDKs. So to build that out, we'll start with step one. And just to kind of quickly go over the structure, we'll close out these files here. All right. So we have two main directories we're going to be working with here, the components directory and the source, which has our front end components. And those are linked to the steps 1, 2, and 3. So connect app, list contact, contact list, create contact, create contact. So each of those corresponds to their pair. And then within the API router, this is where we're going to make our API request to Alloy. So we have a couple requests we need to make. We have to fetch that JWT token. And we'll also have the contacts APIs for getting and posting those contacts. So we'll start with the token route. As I mentioned, that's the first step towards getting this SDK to launch. And now that we're in the start branch, just to see if I run it here, things are not quite built out yet. Refresh the page. When we hit connect app, we'll see gives us some text here, connect app button clicked, implement the Alloy authentication here. So to do that, like I said, first step, we're going to need to bring in call the token endpoint. So to do that, we need a couple of variables. So I'm going to bring those in. So we'll have an API key variable that comes in from our environment. We also need the user ID. And that's also coming in from the environment. We'll have a couple of headers for this request, so I'll just define those here. And I think I'm going to want this to be async also here. So we'll do headers. We're going to have a couple. We'll have authorization. And that takes our Alloy API key, just passed as a bearer token. And we're going to have a accept header. Cool. So once we define our headers, time to make the request to the actual token endpoint. So we'll do response equals await fetch. And I'm just going to copy the URL over. Now, I got this from our API docs and save myself a little bit of time here, but embedded runalloy.com, we have a versioning system here. We're hitting the user's resource by user ID and grabbing the token for them. So pretty straightforward. And then we'll want to pass the headers on that request as well. Next, we need to process the response. And we can return a 200 with the JSON data. And actually, we're going to pass an object with a parameter token. So I think it'll look like that. That should be the first route that we need to build. So that'll fetch our JWT. Now we need to connect this button here to call this API and launch the SDK. So I'm going to flip over to the connect app.js over here, and we'll get started working on that one. So to do that, I'm going to import namely Alloy. And now noticing that in the start branch, we will also want to install the SDK. That is important. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Oh, I think I already have it. Should be good to go. Let me just double check my node modules, make sure I see it there. I do. Okay. Cool. So we have what we're going to be doing here right now. This handle click function is called whenever the button is clicked. So we're basically just going to be replacing the guts of that with our Alloy code. Once again, I'm going to make this, I think, async function here. So first thing we need to do is initialize the Alloy SDK. So we can do that with this line here. Next, we want to fetch the token from the API that we created. We could do that with fetch, or we could also use like Axios if you guys are using some other library. Just to give many ways you can call an API, whatever your preferred way is. So we'll go ahead and get that. So const response await axios.get. Sure I got this right. Oh, equal sign. And just /API/token, because that's our new route that we created over here. Don't need to do any processing for the response. So we can basically just, with Axios, so we can take the response and do alloy.setToken. What we're doing now is basically taking that JWT, passing it to the SDK, and then setting sort of a user session with that JWT token. All right, now that we've set the token, it's time to authenticate the user. This is actually launching that SDK. So we're going to do alloy.authenticate, which is the method to open up that modal. And we'll have an object in there, which takes a few things. So for this case, what we saw before, we want to type category and CRM. So what this is doing is telling that pop-up how we showed all the CRMs at once. We can do it that way, where we can show an entire category. If you omit this parameter, it'll just show all the apps that we support. And this app parameter can also be app instead. And you can pass a specific one like Salesforce. So some flexibility there in terms of whether you want your users to sort of connect to all CRMs or just one specific CRM that you're offering integrations to. I'm going to do category for today, since we're kind of looking at all CRMs, and that way we can kind of just take a look at how a unified API can benefit writing one piece of code to work with multiple systems. All right, so category CRM, and then this also gives us a callback function, and we'll call that data. And this callback function happens when the modal closes there. And when it does, it gives us a connection ID and a success message. So it has two properties, success, true or false, and then a connection ID, assuming it was successful. So when we receive that connection ID back, we can do a couple things. I'll run this set function here. So we could, you might want to save this in like a state, or you'd save this in your database. For today, I just set it in the state and then also on local storage. But presumably at this point, you would write whatever logic you need to save that connection ID and associate it with your user. So we'll do data.connection ID. And we'll also just set that item on local storage, like I was saying. All right. I think that should be all we need to do here to get this running. So I'm going to go ahead and rerun the server, and let's test out if we get the modal to pop up here. Would you look at that? Did everything right first try. Unusual. Cool. So we have our modal popping up. We can authenticate, and this will generate that connection ID, which gets saved in a couple places here. The next step that we need to do would be to set this up so we can refresh the contacts, or rather list the contacts out. So now that we have a connection, let's build the routes to fetch the contacts. So I'm going to go into the contacts.js, which is an API route, our other API route. And I'm going to just get rid of this stuff here, make it async before I forget. Go ahead and start on this piece. Cool. Similarly to our token API, we'll need to bring in our API key and another ID as well. So your API key again, we'll do that from the environment. And in this case, we need a connection ID, which is going to come in from the query when we make this request. We'll have a few headers that are shared for both the GET and the POST request. So we'll just define those up here. We'll have an authorization header again. And we'll have a content type header. And also a accept header. I need to handle both GET and POST requests with this function here. So to do that, I'm just going to use a switch statement on method. And we're going to have a couple of cases in here. So for the first case, we have GET. And I'm going to call this GET response. I'm going to use fetch again here. I'm going to copy this URL from my notes here. All right, so we're now pointing to the Alloy unified API. We can know that because it says /1 here. That's how we call our unified API. We're pointing at the CRM category that we support. We also have accounting and commerce. So you'll find those paths different. And then contacts, where we're passing the connection ID that we generate from the initial connection. We'll also want to pass in our headers. So we'll just do that here. That should be enough for that request. Process the response here since we're using fetch. And we'll still have this guy to return a 200 and with the get data. All right. Oh, and we'll need to break out of that when we're done. Okay, so now we'll set up the post route. So that one's going to be for fetching all the contacts and then just simply returning the data that we get. We'll do the post route. Pretty much the same URL actually as this one above. So I'll just copy it from up there. Cool. And for this one, we do have a couple other parameters we need to define. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll need to do a method for this one because it's a post request. Then we'll need to pass the headers and the body. We'll do request.body. That should be all we need for the request data. And then we'll have a post data, process the response here, similar to the first one. And then returning the data. Okay. And probably for good measure, should break out of that as well. That should set us up our contacts route to fetch contact data and create contact data. The next step is we want to wire these front-end components up to those APIs so we can hopefully make some requests by them. So let's go ahead and see if we can get that set up. So I hopped over here into the contact list.js file. So this one is going to be where we define, really we're only going to be touching this fetch contacts function, got some boilerplate in here, but when the button is clicked, it's fetching contacts. So we want to modify this function here. And just like all the other functions we've been writing, async, since we're usually fetching data. And we're going to just do a few things here. I think we'll want our set function still. Now we're going to call the new API route that we set up. Call in that with the connection ID. And that should return us our contact data. So we want to process that. And then we can set contacts with the contact data. Data. All right. And just to see if we've done some of this right, let's go ahead and grab that connection ID from before. Hop over here. Just going to manually set it to give it a test. Refresh my page. Oh, looks like I didn't quite do this right. So let's see what it says. Or I may be having that expired credits issue. One second. Let's try that again where I can see the whole log. Yeah, got undefined there. So let's just go walk through the flow here. Test it out. So I'm going to choose a different CRM this time just to show that we can connect to other CRMs. Pop open the console so we can see what's happening. And for good measure, why don't we log the connection ID when we're doing that? So when we connect the app, we'll also just log out that we got a new connection. All right. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just connect. We got fast refresh over here. So updates instantly, choose an account, brings me back to the app. See in the, and then we get a new connection ID. Now I didn't get the log, probably because I already passed it. There we go. So I have a few contacts in my HubSpot, and then only a few. And then we would be able to create a contact had we wired up that part, but we have not yet. So create contact functionality will be implemented here. Let's go do it. All right, so to create a contact, similar to the last one, we just have this one function that we need to change here. So this handle submit function, make everything async. And we'll do response, await, fetch. API, contacts, same route as last time. All right, connection ID, and since this one is a post request, we'll want to include those parameters. Method here is going to be post. And we're passing the body. All right, let's see. Oh, I think we'll need to, data needs to be stringified here, so. All right, so now that we've written that out, we can write, let's see, like Tristan Howard. Ignore my poor front end code here and hit add. If it didn't quite work, let's see. We got 200. Looks like it did work actually, yep. So we have headers, post, we have a post request here. It responds with the remote ID for this new contact that we created. And then, whoop, let me close that down. Now, when I refresh these contacts, we should also see that contact show up. And there they are. So we've also, just to go close the loop here, as I believe that was a HubSpot connection, should be able to sign into our HubSpot here as well. And now see that, again, the same code that we've set up here works for any CRM that we have. So if I go into my contact list here, we now see Tristan Howard. So yeah, to quickly just review again what we've done, we kind of from scratch or from our boilerplate code, we implemented the Alloy Tokens API. We fetch a token and use that to connect to a third party like Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoho, etc. That gives us a connection ID, which we can use to retrieve uniform data across all these different apps. And then we're creating a contact. And while I only showed it with 2 fields here, something I do want to highlight is that this is a normalized data structure. So we defined this as first name, last name, but more commonly, you're also going to have other fields like phone, email, etc. So looking at the Alloy docs here just for a sec, on the unified API, if I click on like the contacts model here, we can get like a little bit more of a picture of all the fields that are kind of supported. So any of these are sort of available out of the box and completely normalized across all of those CRMs. And we have some features to reach beyond that if you need. So that's, yeah, the gist of it. I think I've got one more thing to show here, and then I'll pass it back over to Anurag. Last thing I want to leave you with is just some next steps we've got here. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Anurag.
Thank you, Kelly. Great demo. And we said we were going to integrate with a CRM in 30 minutes, and it looks like you integrated with multiple. So good stuff there. Folks who have joined us, we really appreciate it. There are a couple of options that you have in terms of next steps. The most obvious one being, if you haven't already, sign up for Alloy's Unified API. Try building this use case for yourself. You can go through this project. It's completely open sourced and available from this event page on GitHub. And then additionally, you can also explore the other Unified API categories that Alloy supports. So here we covered CRM. As Kelly mentioned, Unified API covers all of your most critical user-facing integrations. So that includes ERP and accounting systems like NetSuite and QuickBooks, and then major commerce platforms like Magento, Shopify, BigCommerce, etc. So feel free to scan the QR code on the top, start playing around with it for yourself, completely free. Or alternatively, if you have a specific CRM integration or use case that you're working on that you'd like to discuss and see if we might be able to help you support and ship, feel free to scan the second QR code to set up a call with one of our CRM experts so we can talk through all that. Checking the chat here, it doesn't look like we have any questions. Folks are feeling shy, but we did have a few come in before the session. And so, Kelly, I'm just going to run those by you now.
Sweet.
The first one, and I think you started to hit on this when you dug into API reference, into the documentation, but outside of contacts, which is what we focused on in this particular session, what other kind of CRM objects can we sync?
Yeah, so actually, I don't know why I stopped sharing. Let me share back up. But yeah, we have a number of other objects that you can share, work with today. So inside the CRM category, if you want to get more info on that, let me just get this guy out of here. You can come straight to our documentation. You can see all the different objects that we have to work with per category. And then we also have up here in our guides, you can see all the common models that we're supported, and per category, you can come see exactly which methods are supported for each app across all the ones that we support.
Good stuff. And then secondly, again, you started to cover this, but I saw that you do first name and last name, but how can I use other fields? And yeah, I mean, obviously there's any number of fields supported within the common model, but why don't we explain if there's not a field that's supported by the common model, what happens then?
Yeah, great question. Super common use case would be like custom fields in a CRM. Typically, we want to work with those as well. So you're not just limited to the fields that we have in our common model. What we do provide is, say, for listing contacts, we have the ability to fetch all of the raw data in addition to this normalized model. So you can get both the full underlying payload along with the normalized data. And then for writing data, that would give you custom fields for reading. For writing data, we have this remotes fields object, which is pretty handy. But basically what this enables you to do is interface with any field on that API request. So if you're creating a contact in Salesforce and you want to add a custom field, this is where you define that field to send in. Another option that we have is if, say, we don't even have your API, you want to work with an object we don't support. For example, we don't have activities for CRM today, although we're always adding new stuff. But if you wanted to use that, you can using our pass-through APIs. So what this does is basically allow you to define a URL, leverage our underlying connection. So all of the authentication that we showed you, just leverage those tokens and hit any API in Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoho, or whatever. So in that way, you can expand beyond the things supported by Alloy.
Great. And then off of the topic of authentication, who actually manages user credentials? Like, obviously we walked through the flow of how the modal works and everything today. But who's responsible for actually storing and managing credentials once users authenticate?
Yeah, once the user authenticates, let's say for Salesforce, which is OAuth 2, Alloy is storing a refresh token and the access token. You don't ever need to worry about that. The only thing that our users or our customers need to manage is that connection ID and user ID as it relates to their system. So that connection ID is really like a rolled up identifier that includes that user ID and the authentication all in one. So once you have a connection with Unified, it's really just that one ID to maintain against your users. We handle all of the specifics within the authentication, say access tokens, or is it an API key based off or something different? You'll never have to worry about that through Alloy Unified.
Great. Well, it looks like that's all we had. So thank you to the few of you who have stayed a few minutes past the designated end time here. We hope that you found this session useful. And like we said, this project is open source. Please feel free to take it on yourself and feel free to reach out to either of us personally on LinkedIn with any questions. And we're happy to put you in touch with the right people on our team if you have a CRM integration and use case that you're looking to build. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.